I never thought a simple piece of clothing could cause so much trouble. It was just a winter vest, but to my neighbor Karen, it looked like a bomb. Before I knew it, the police were called, and I found myself in the middle of a terrifying misunderstanding with Karen. Here's how it all went down. I was just minding my own business in my front yard on a chilly winter morning, wearing my favorite winter vest and sipping on my coffee. The sun had just risen, casting a warm golden glow over the neighborhood. It was the perfect start to the day. That's when my neighbor from across the street appeared out of nowhere and strode up to me. She was in her 40s, with a sharp tongue and an annoying habit of getting involved in other people's business. She had always been a thorn in my side, but I never expected what was about to happen. "Excuse me," Karen said, her voice dripping with suspicion. "What are you wearing?" I looked down at my vest, confused. "It's just my winter vest. Keeps me warm." Karen's eyes narrowed. "I know a bomb when I see one," she said, her voice rising. "What are you really up to?" I was taken aback by her accusation. "What? No, it's just a vest. I'm not up to anything." Karen wasn't convinced. She stood there, hands on her hips, eyes darting around as if she were assessing the situation. I could feel my blood boiling. Karen continued to berate me, making statements that would make anybody's blood boil. She kept insisting that my vest was a bomb and that I was up to no good. I tried to explain to her that it was just a vest, but she wouldn't listen. "You're lying," she said, her voice rising. "I know a bomb when I see one. You're up to something, I just know it." I tried to remain calm, but it was getting harder and harder. Karen's voice was loud and shrill, and it seemed like the whole neighborhood could hear her. I could feel my face growing red with anger. "Why won't you believe me?" I said, raising my voice. "It's just a vest! I swear!" Karen's eyes flashed with anger. "I don't believe you," she said. "You're up to something, and I'm going to find out what it is." I started to get nervous. I didn't want the police to show up, and I definitely didn't want Karen causing a scene in front of my house. I tried to reason with her, but it was no use. "Listen, Karen," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "I'm not up to anything. I'm just wearing a vest. Can we please just drop this?" Karen shook her head. "No," she said. "I'm not dropping anything until I figure out what's going on here." I could feel my blood pressure rising. This woman was impossible. I tried to take a step back, but she stepped forward, her face inches from mine. "You're hiding something," she said, her breath hot on my face. "I know it." That was it. I had had enough. I took a step forward, invading her personal space. "Listen, Karen," I said, my voice low and menacing. "I'm not hiding anything. It's just a vest. Now back off." Karen stepped back, her eyes wide with fear. I could see that I had finally gotten through to her. She took a deep breath and looked around as if she was trying to decide what to do next. "That's it," she said, her voice shaking. "I'm calling the police." I watched as she pulled out her phone and dialed 911. I knew I had to do something, but I wasn't sure what. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I waited for her to finish the call. As soon as the police arrived, Karen told the police that I was making a bomb. I watched in disbelief as they got out of their cruiser and approached me. They asked to see what I was wearing, and I showed them my winter vest. I could tell by their faces that they were just as confused as I was. "This is just a vest," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "There's no bomb here." The police officers looked at each other and then back at me. "Ma'am," one of them said to Karen, "we're going to need you to step back." Karen protested, but the officers were firm. They asked me a few more questions, and I answered them truthfully. They checked my ID and asked me to stay put while they went back to their cruiser to run a check. I could hear Karen muttering to herself behind me, but I didn't turn around. I was too focused on the police officers and what they were going to do next. A few minutes later, the officers returned. They handed me back my ID and looked at Karen. "Ma'am," one of them said, "there's no bomb here, it's just a vest." Karen looked shocked. "What? But I saw him making a bomb," she protested. The officers just shook their heads. "We're going to have to ask you to come with us," one of them said to Karen. "You're disrupting the peace." Karen turned red with anger. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice rising. "I demand to know what's going on here." The officers didn't say anything. They just escorted Karen to their cruiser and put her in the back seat. I watched as they drove away, shaking my head in disbelief. I couldn't believe what had just happened. This woman had accused me of making a bomb and had called the police on me. And for what? Just because I was wearing a winter vest? It was ridiculous. I turned to go back inside my house, still in shock. As I walked up to my front door, I heard a voice behind me. "You're lucky," Karen said, her voice low and menacing. "You got away with it this time." I turned around to face her, my heart pounding in my chest. "What are you talking about?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Karen just smirked. "You know what I'm talking about," she said. "You won this time, but don't think I'm going to forget about this." I watched as the police officers drove away with Karen in the back seat. I couldn't believe what had just happened. How could she accuse me of making a bomb just because I was wearing a winter vest? It was ridiculous. I went back inside my house and sat down on my couch, still shaking from the encounter. I couldn't get the image of Karen's face out of my head. She had been so sure I was up to something, and it was all because of a silly misunderstanding. I decided to take a few deep breaths and try to calm down. I turned on the TV and tried to focus on something else, but my mind kept going back to the confrontation with Karen. I knew I needed to do something to clear my head. After a few minutes, I got up and decided to go for a walk. I put on my shoes and headed out the door, still feeling a little shaken up. As I walked, I tried to focus on my breathing and the sounds around me. I took deep breaths and let the cool air fill my lungs. As I walked, I realized that I was starting to feel better. The fresh air and exercise were clearing my head, and I was starting to feel more like myself again. I decided to walk a little further and enjoy the scenery. After walking for a while, I realized that I was hungry. I decided to stop by the grocery store and pick up a few things for dinner. As I walked through the aisles, I felt my stress level start to decrease. I picked out some fresh vegetables and a few pieces of chicken and headed to the checkout. As I waited in line, I realized that I was feeling much better. The confrontation with Karen was behind me, and I was ready to move on. I paid for my groceries and headed back home, feeling calm and centered. When I got home, I put the groceries away and decided to make myself a cup of tea. I sat down on my couch with my tea and looked out the window. The sun was starting to set, casting a warm orange glow over the neighborhood. It was a beautiful sight. As I sipped my tea, I realized that I had learned something important from my encounter with Karen. I had learned that sometimes people make assumptions based on incomplete information, and that it's important to stay calm and keep a level head in these situations. I knew that I would never forget this lesson, and that it would help me in the future. And if you guys are wondering if Karen ever got her payback on me, well, let's just say that she has bigger things to worry about now. After my incident with her, other neighbors forwarded their own experiences with her to the police department. She'll have to worry about a lot of things before getting back to me. Wow, that was wild. Can't believe Karen thought a winter vest was a bomb. Some people just have no chill. Glad to hear justice was served in the end, though. This happened yesterday. When I came home from work, I noticed my shed door was open and the padlock that I used to keep it shut was broken, and I had a lot of bags full of soda cans in there. I tend to drink a lot of soda, so I've built up a lot of cans, and I was going to cash them in at the bottle drop soon. There was more than just my cans missing from the shed, too. I was missing some gardening tools, a machete, and a gas can. I went to check my security cameras, and early in the morning, right after I left for work, I saw my 3 nephews break into my shed using a hammer to smash the lock and taking the cans, as well as the other stuff. I called my sister, and she and her husband denied their kids did it until I showed up at their house with the footage from my cameras. They were furious with their kids for robbing me and skipping school to do it. I got the other stuff back. The gas can was emptied, though. But they'd already cashed all of the cans. I wanted the money from the cans, and my nephews had already spent it all on video games and junk food. I demanded to know how much they got from the cans, and it was nearly $200. I told my sister she now owes me over $200 for the cans and the broken padlock. My sister and brother-in-law went from being angry at their kids to making excuses for them and then being angry at me for wanting that money back when I know they have 3 kids and a mortgage. I said it was either that or I go to the police and press charges. They told me to get out, and I said they have 2 days to decide how to pay me back before I go to the cops. My nephews are thieves and have stolen from me before. That's why I got the cameras. What my nephews did was most definitely wrong. But I also know my sister and brother-in-law can't really afford to pay me back. And they're blowing up my phone and calling me a jerk for giving them the ultimatum when I know they're nearly broke after the holidays. Well, I went to the police. I tried to work with my sister and brother-in-law when I called them this morning because I didn't want to wait till after they were done with work to speak with them. Not only did they refuse any sort of suggested way of repaying me, they actually said that it was my fault for having the cans there to begin with. They said I tempted my nephews with the money. I was enraged and said I was done with them. Then they started blowing up my phone all over again. My eldest nephew sent me a picture of him holding a soda can and giving me the finger. So that was it. I went to the police station and filed the report. I gave them a copy of the video footage of my nephews stealing from my shed. I gave them the broken lock they smashed. I showed them all of the texts which were screenshot and also given as evidence. Hell, I even gave them the photo my eldest nephew sent me of him flipping me off. I don't know if my nephews have been arrested yet, but I'm assured they will be. Perhaps some community service will change their attitudes. I did tell the police that I found it worrisome that my nephews had taken the machete, but it was as I thought. They classified it as a tool, especially since they took a lot of other actual tools. Other than the machete, they also took some gardening shears, a steel rake, 2 shovels, one of them being one of those folding camping ones, a full 2-gallon gas can, a cheap power drill I got for like $5 used, an electric hedge trimmer, and a small electric chainsaw that was also used. They didn't touch the lawnmower, weed whacker, extension cords, or the old radio I had in there. No idea why they took what they did, but I guess they figured they could resell them or something. But I got all of that back, minus the gas that was in the gas can. No idea what they used it for, but it was old gas anyway. After they first broke into my shed, they took what they could by hand, and then they came back with some shopping carts that I'm guessing they also stole. But it took them a few trips to get all of the cans, and they didn't bother to even try and close the door when they were done. Either way, though, my nephews are now in trouble for trespassing, larceny, and harassment. I'm sure either today or tomorrow my phone is going to be blowing up like mad when the cops come for those kids. But I said it was my hill to die on, and I meant it. I don't even care if I get the money back now. They had their chance. I've already replaced the lock on the shed with a much stronger one, and the machete will no longer be kept in the shed. I've also talked to a few of my neighbors about what happened. They told me cans have actually been going missing around the neighborhood lately. If anybody had a bag of cans sitting out, it'd get stolen. Can't say if my nephews were the culprits, but if they were, then they've been doing this for months. I've also spoken with my relatives, and they're fed up with my sister and brother-in-law too. So, they're all on my side at least, which is good to know. I was worried they'd turn on me since I filed the police report. But no, I just got a lot of good for you. And it's about damn time those kids face some justice. I wasn't the only one in the family they stole from. Many of the people I asked tried to say I should offer that my nephews work off the $200. There's no way I was going to do that. The little jerks hate doing any work they don't want to do and will just stand around griping and acting like the world is against them. And they'd have to be supervised the entire time, which is another thing I don't want to do. Plus, I banned them from my house for good reason. The theft started with food and snacks, and then went on to DVDs and video games. That made me start putting my initials on cases and discs with permanent markers, so I was able to show when my nephews had taken something of mine. They tried the "oh, he let us borrow them" excuse a few times, but I always called BS, and then made them return the stuff they took, which they always acted like I was a jerk for doing. And then when they were made to apologize to me each time, they were the fakest apologies I've ever heard. The final straw that banned my nephews from my house was when they used the spare hidden key to my house to get in and stole 3 six-packs of my favorite blood orange beer from my fridge, along with raiding my kitchen for anything else they wanted. One of them took a dump in my bathroom and not only didn't flush, but also intentionally pissed on the floor. They tried to say it wasn't them, but I knew it was. The beer they stole was even hidden in their room. My sister and brother-in-law barely punished them and basically gave me an equivalent to "boys will be boys." Then berated me when I said they and their kids were no longer welcome at my home ever again. And that's all why I got the cameras. When I had them installed, I told no one, which was a very smart idea because my nephews had no idea they were there when they broke into my shed. Guess I was their easiest target. When I can afford it, I plan to get more cameras inside my house too. About midway through last week, when I came home from work, I noticed that my shed door was open, and the padlock that I used to keep it shut was broken. I had a lot of bags full of soda cans in there that my friends and I drank. I had built up a lot of cans over the course of about a year, and I was going to cash them in at the bottle drop soon because it pays 10 cents a can where I live. However, there was more than just my bags of cans missing from the shed. They took my gardening shears, a steel rake, 2 shovels, one of them being one of those folding camping ones, a full 2-gallon gas can, a cheap power drill I got for like $5 used, an electric hedge trimmer, a small electric chainsaw that was also used, and a machete. They didn't touch the lawnmower, weed whacker, extension cords, or the old radio I had in there. I have no idea why they took what they did, but I guess they figured they could resell them or something. I checked my camera footage, and there were my 3 nephews, ages 16, 15, and 14, breaking into my shed with one of their dad's large claw hammers. I recognize the hammer because it's bright yellow and black, and their dad has a bunch of them. It only took them a few hits to smash that cheap lock. After they first broke into my shed, they took what they could by hand, and then they came back with some shopping carts that I'm guessing they also stole. But it took them a few trips to get all of the cans, and they didn't bother to even try and close the door when they were done. My sister and brother-in-law BIL first denied their kids stole anything from me, so I went to their house and showed them the security footage from my cameras. I hadn't told them I'd had cameras installed, and the reason I had the cameras put in was because of prior thefts by my nephews. It started with food and snacks, and then moved on to DVDs and video games. Pretty much anything they thought they could smuggle out after that. Anytime I made them return stuff they'd stolen from me, I was treated like the bad guy, and then got the fakest apologies I've ever heard. And they never got in much trouble from their parents either. The final straw happened last year, when my nephews broke into my house and stole 3 six-packs of my favorite blood orange beer from my fridge. They used my hidden spare key to get in, and also took a huge dump in one of my bathrooms, and not only didn't flush, but also peed all over the floor. And I'm pretty sure it was intentional. The beer they stole was hidden in one of their bedrooms when I confronted my sister and BIL about my nephews stealing it. And I was basically given an equivalent to boys will be boys when I wanted them punished. So I had the cameras put in and told no one, which was a smart move. When my sister and BIL saw the camera footage of my nephew stealing from me, they seemed furious. But they were actually madder that their boys skipped school to steal from me. They'd spent all day making repeated trips to the bottle drop and cashing the cans by machine. The bottle drop also pays by machine, so they just kept bringing the cans in until they cashed them all. And then they bought video games and junk food with the money. Said money actually amounted to nearly $200. With that and the destroyed padlock, I told my sister and BIL that they now owed me $200. My sister and BIL went from being angry at their kids to making excuses for them, and then being angry at me for wanting that money back when I know they have 3 kids and a mortgage. I said it was either that or I go to the police and press charges. They told me to get out, and I said they have 2 days to decide how to pay me back before I go to the cops. I got back everything else my nephew stole, the machete and gas can included, though they'd already used the gas for something. But over the next couple of days, my sister and BL were blowing up my phone with a ton of messages, both verbal and text. At first, they were calling me heartless because it was right after the holidays and they have 3 kids and a mortgage. Then they started gaslighting me, then even threatening me. And all of this would go in a repeating cycle. My nephews chimed in from another cell phone and were sending me lots of messages of their own, which were more fake apologies and gaslighting. My eldest nephew even sent me a picture of himself holding a soda can and giving me the middle finger. So I guess they weren't taking my threats of going to the police seriously because family. When I last spoke with my sister and B to continuation, IL refused to negotiate any sort of method of repayment for what my nephews did, even when I suggested they just sell the video games that were purchased with the money from the cans. Then they had the audacity to say I'd actually tempted my nephews by having the cans in my shed to begin with. Oh yes, I'm the devil snake that tempted my nephews with a shed full of cans that just screamed, money, money, money. So that was it. I went to the police station that morning and filed the report. I gave them a copy of the video footage of my nephews stealing from my shed, the broken lock they smashed, and showed them all of the texts, which were screenshotted and also given as evidence. Hell, I even gave them a copy of the photo my eldest nephew sent me of him flipping me off. I did tell the police that I found it worrisome that my nephews had taken the machete, but they classified it as a tool, especially since they took a lot of other actual tools. So fair enough on that, I suppose. But my nephews were indeed arrested on Saturday. The police came to their house, and my sister and BIL were forced to let them in because they had a warrant. Apparently, all 3 of my nephews went from being cocky little jerks to crying like babies when they were being put in cuffs. I know this because a neighbor I'm acquainted with that's sort of friends with my sister was there to see it. Shortly after the arrest, my sister and BIL were blowing up my phone again. They weren't able to get their kids out of jail until Monday morning. And now the boys are being charged with larceny, willful destruction of property, vandalism, and harassment. The police took this whole case pretty seriously as there have been complaints about my nephews for some time, but nothing was proven until now. The past few months, bags of cans have actually been going missing all over the area. I don't know if it was my nephews or not, but they're likely suspects. With word spreading of their arrest, let's hope other neighbors with security cameras come forward with more footage. My sister and BIL showed up at my house too. I refused to open the door and told them that this all happened because they are enablers who refuse to hold their kids accountable for their actions. That made them just scream and pound on my door more until I threatened to call the police on them too. And since I've done it already, they know I mean it now. So they left without any more trouble. But they went back to blowing up my phone. I didn't block my sister or BIL. Instead, I decided to save all of the messages they send me because I've made the decision to take them to small claims court over this. I don't really need or want the money, and have already replaced the destroyed padlock with a much better one. However, the kids aren't the only ones who need to be taught a lesson. In the end, I hope I put them in enough of a hole that they learn not to mess with me ever again. I also have the full support of my family on this. My parents, aunts, uncles, cousins, etc. They're all supporting me in this because my nephews have stolen from them too. too. And after banning my nephews from my house, some of them did the same. I'm gonna push for my nephews to get community service. And the reason why isn't just because it's a good idea, but also because I know that they'll hate that the most. Whenever made to do any kind of work they don't want to do, they just stand around griping and act like the whole world is against them. So hardly anything ever gets done. Perhaps a few hundred hours of unpaid work will teach them some manners. Wow, that's insane! It's so frustrating when people you trust end up betraying you like that. Good for them for standing their ground and going to the police. It's a shame that it had to come to that, though. Hopefully, the nephews will learn their lesson and start respecting other people's property. This is an amusing story from the 70s that just popped into my head. I was in high school at the time, and we lived in a townhouse development in a suburban area. Our next-door neighbor was a bit strange. He lived alone and drove one car, while we had two. My dad's truck and a Pinto that I drove. I miss that car sometimes. It taught me a lot about maintenance. Each townhouse had one assigned parking space, but there were 6 guest spaces across the street from our houses. And in the 70s, 2-car households were not as common as they are now. 3 or more car households were unheard of. I parked the Pinto in one of the guest spaces, but twice, the neighbor knocked on our door and asked me to move it to another space, even though there were other guest spaces available. The first time my dad answered the door and told him I was taking a nap, even though I wasn't, and that he wasn't going to wake me. The neighbor seemed taken aback by this response, but didn't press the issue further. The second time, my brother answered the door, and the neighbor asked him if I could move the car to a different guest space. My brother, who was always quick on his feet, told him that I couldn't move the car because it had no radiator. This was actually true. The Pinto had a leaky radiator, and I had a friend pick me and the radiator up so we could fix it at his place. We were successful in our repair, and the Pinto was back on the road. The neighbor's insistence on that particular parking space remains a mystery to this day, and we never did find out why he needed it so badly. Looking back on the experience, it's funny to think about how much has changed since the 70s. 2-car households are now the norm, and guest parking is often hard to come by in many suburban areas. But some things remain the same, like quirky neighbors and the memories they leave behind. Love this story. Reminds me of the crazy neighbors I had growing up. That Pinto sounds like a real gem too. If you enjoyed today's stories, check out the other videos on your screen now. Submit your own stories at you'rethejerk.com. Subscribe now, or you're definitely the jerk.